Imagine for a second that you are living in a house. And while you're sitting on your couch, just reading a book, there's this crew of invisible contractors systematically replacing the plumbing
Right.
and the wiring, the foundation, even the roof over your head.
Just completely rebuilding it.
Exactly. And you don't have to move out, but like every time you open a door, the room behind it works entirely differently than it did yesterday.
Yeah, that's a pretty vivid way to picture it.
Well, looking at this morning's AI News Digest for today, April 21, 2026, it really hit me that we are all sitting inside that house right now.
Yeah.
So welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Our mission today is to take these, disparate headlines from our source material and try to map out the actual mechanics of how artificial intelligence is rewiring four core pillars of human life. We're looking at education, healthcare, business, and art.
Yeah, and I think the overarching narrative
Yeah.
connecting all these updates, it isn't just about software getting faster, right? We are looking at a really profound structural shift regarding optimization because society is currently basically beta testing this delicate, often pretty precarious balance.
A balance between what exactly?
Well, between AI's unprecedented ability to optimize complex systems like how we learn, how we heal, how we work, and the heavy, heavy friction that this kind of hyper-optimization creates in everyday life.
Okay, that makes sense. The goal of this deep dive is to basically break down the mechanics of that shift so you, listening right now, can see exactly how those floorboards are being replaced beneath your feet.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this, and let's start at the absolute foundation, which is education.
Good place to start.
I mean, we've been hearing for years about AI in the classroom, right? But the digest highlights a real shift from like a novelty to actual systemic integration. We are essentially teaching the next generation with AI to prepare them for an AI omnipresent world.
Right, but I really want to stress this isn't just about giving kids a smarter search engine.
Yeah.
Far from it. The current wave of AI integration involves building real-time probabilistic models of a student's actual cognition.
Wait, probabilistic models, what does that actually look like?
Well, we're moving away from the old static broadcast model of education.
Where a teacher just delivers one curriculum to 30 different minds.
Exactly. Now we're moving toward dynamic multimodal adaptation. The software isn't just grading the final answers anymore. It's tracking the entire pathway to the answer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it analyzes keystroke cadence, natural language inputs, syntax errors. It even looks at the micro-hesitations before a student makes a multiple-choice selection.
So wait, it's looking at the metadata of how a kid actually thinks.
Precisely.
So if I hesitate for, say, 2 seconds on a geometry problem, the AI recognizes a potential gap in my spatial reasoning.
And instantly pivots the lesson plan to accommodate that exact cognitive bottleneck, yeah.
That is wild.
It creates a completely individualized cognitive pathway. I mean, if an algorithm detects, say, working memory overload based on how complex a student's text input is, it automatically breaks the next concept down into smaller, discrete chunks.
It just adapts on the fly.
Right. The system adjusts the variable weights of its own teaching model in real time to keep the student in what psychologists call the zone of proximal development.
The zone of proximal development, meaning what?
It's the sweet spot where learning is challenging, but not, frustrating.
Okay, I mean, that sounds like getting a bespoke suit tailored perfectly to your individual brain rather than forcing everyone into a one-size-fits-all curriculum.
It's a great analogy.
But here's where it gets really interesting and, well, where my skepticism kicks in. To tailor that suit, the AI needs incredibly precise, invasive measurements.
Yes, it does.
We are talking about massive data exhaust generated by literal children. Who owns the hesitation data? Who owns the algorithm's map of a 10-year-old's cognitive weaknesses?
That is the big question. The digest emphasizes that data privacy is the primary friction point educators are currently wrestling with.
I would imagine so.
When a school district signs a contract with an AI vendor, the granular data regarding a student's learning style, their attention span, their frustration triggers, that is often routed through proprietary servers.
Which is concerning.
Extremely. The tension is figuring out how to anonymize and protect cognitive data when the very nature of the product requires intimate profiling to even function correctly.
Right, and I want to push back on the access issue as well.
Okay, let's hear it.
If this is the new standard, this hyper-optimized real-time cognitive mapping, Aren't we just supercharging the digital divide?
Oh, definitely.
Are we creating a world where well-funded schools get the bespoke AI tailors and everyone else, all the underfunded schools, just get a standard screen? We're basically guaranteeing that the gap between students with and without tech access becomes a biological cognitive chasm.
Yeah, the systemic risk of tech inequity is severe here.
Yeah.
If the baseline standard of education diverges based purely on access to these data-hungry tools, we risk creating a permanent underclass of students.
Students who only receive the old one-size-fits-all education.
Exactly. The source material outlines that schools are no longer just, adopting technology. They're being forced to act as arbiters of social equity.
Which is a huge burden for a school district.
It is. They have to figure out how to deploy these tools without accelerating a two-tiered societal structure.
Which is terrifying, really, because if we follow that thread, if we are already wrestling with data privacy regarding how our kids think,
The stakes go up.
they escalate dramatically when those same predictive mechanisms are applied to how we live and die.
Yes,
Healthcare.
exactly. The Source Digest outlines a massive revolution in patient care driven entirely by prediction.
So the transition from cognitive mapping to biological mapping relies on a very similar underlying mechanism.
Neural networks finding hidden, nonlinear correlations in massive data sets. Historically, medicine has been fundamentally reactive, right?
Right. You get sick, you go to the doctor.
You experience a symptom, you go to a clinic, and a doctor attempts to diagnose the existing failure. But predictive AI shifts the paradigm entirely to proactive intervention.
Yeah, the phrase from the digest that really jumped out at me was remarkable accuracy in spotting patterns before health issues become critical.
It is remarkable.
It's like having a hyper-accurate weather forecast for your own body. Knowing a Category 5 storm is brewing 3 years before you even feel a single raindrop.
That's exactly how it works. And the algorithms achieve this by analyzing thousands of variables across millions of electronic health records simultaneously.
Something a human just can't do.
Exactly. A human doctor, no matter how brilliant they are,
Yeah.
they just cannot synthesize the correlation between, say, a microscopic variation in a routine retinal scan, a slight dip in blood pressure, and a specific protein marker to predict a severe cardiac event 5 years down the line.
Right.
But a deep learning model, it can adjust its internal weights to recognize that exact constellation of subtle biomarkers.
It's an absolute miracle of early detection. But, with great power comes great responsibility, or in this case, with great power comes the insurance industry.
Yes.
The friction point.
This is where the miracle hits the brutal reality of the free market, right? If an AI can predict with 95% accuracy that I will develop a chronic, highly expensive autoimmune disease in 4 years, the healthcare system knows that too.
They do.
So how do we balance this incredible early detection with the absolute nightmare of losing control over our most private health data? How do we prevent this predictive weather forecast from being used by insurance companies to, preemptively deny coverage or skyrocket my premiums before I even have a single symptom?
And that is the central ethical minefield the source material points to. It all comes down to patient consent and data protection.
Because the AI needs the data to work? Right. To achieve that high level of predictive accuracy, the AI requires massive, frictionless data pools. We're talking genomic sequences, real-time biometric tracking from wearables, longitudinal family history.
It's everything about us.
But if that data lake is commodified, the proactive model turns into a surveillance tool.
Right, it just becomes a financial risk assessment algorithm rather than a medical tool.
Exactly the concern. The foundational pillar required to make this new medical era viable, ethically sound, is airtight, informed patient consent.
People need to trust it.
The system requires patients to trust that their most intimate biological data will strictly be used for clinical intervention, not actuarial penalty.
Because if they don't trust it.
If the public loses trust in how their biological source code is being handled, they will simply opt out of the data pool. And then the predictive efficacy of the entire system collapses.
Wow. Okay, let's unpack this on an even bigger scale. If we have deep learning models mapping our individual cognitive friction in schools and mapping our physical health outcomes in clinics.
The natural escalation is macro.
Right. The natural escalation is weaponizing that computational power to predict and optimize our collective behavior in the broader economy.
Yes. The digest details a massive digital transformation within the business sector, heavily leveraging AI to optimize supply chains and predict market trends.
How does that actually work under the hood?
The mechanism here is often reinforcement learning. Businesses are essentially building digital twins of their global logistics networks.
Okay, wait. Digital twins?
Yeah, a complete functional digital replica of every truck, ship, and warehouse in their system.
Oh, wow. I mean, I see companies using this to gain a competitive edge, and it makes total sense. If you're a logistics firm and your competitor has an AI that can predict a spike in raw material costs based on, like, geopolitical sentiment analysis.
And weather patterns, shipping lane congestion.
Right, all of that. If they have that and you don't, you either adapt or you go bankrupt.
And the algorithms don't just find the shortest route for a cargo ship. They dynamically adjust thousands of nodes in a supply chain in real time.
How's thousands? If a localized weather event delays a factory in one hemisphere, the AI automatically recalculates procurement from alternative vendors globally to ensure zero disruption on the retail shelf.
That's incredible.
It is an arms race of eliminating waste, reducing overhead, and just maximizing profit margins.
But see, I look at this ruthless optimization, and I see a massive macroeconomic paradox. We are fixing the supply chain, sure, but at the potential cost of the human chain.
The workforce displacement issue.
Exactly. The Source Digest brings up workforce displacement as a major struggle for business leaders.
Yeah.
If a reinforcement learning agent can do the forecasting and routing of a 50-person logistics team in 3 seconds.
Then the free market dictates that you fire those 50 people to maximize the margin.
Right, but if every industry does that, how can they realistically find a balance? Who is left with a paycheck to actually buy all the perfectly optimized products?
And that paradox of automation is probably the most pressing socioeconomic question in the source material right now.
How are business leaders addressing it? Well, they are tasked with managing a transition that threatens to literally hollow out their own consumer base. The Digest frames this as a balancing act, emphasizing the urgent need to ensure human workers are not left behind during digital transformation.
But how is that practically achieved, though? I mean, reskilling is a great corporate buzzword.
Yeah.
But if the AI is genuinely better at complex data analysis and prediction, what exactly are we reskilling people to do?
It's a great point. This shift requires redefining the value of human labor entirely. It involves moving humans away from predictable, data-heavy tasks which algorithms will always execute with higher fidelity and transitioning them into roles requiring high emotional intelligence, nuanced negotiation, and ethical oversight.
But the free market almost always rewards pure, ruthless efficiency.
That's the friction. That transition requires massive capital investment in the workforce at the exact moment. Companies are tempted to cut human capital costs to pay for the AI integration itself.
So it's a trap.
It can be. Leaders who view AI purely as a labor replacement tool will optimize themselves into an economic dead end. Successful integration requires using the technology to augment human capabilities, not just strip mine the payroll.
Okay, so we've gone through a lot. The invisible contractors have rewired the schools, the hospitals, and the global economy. They've optimized our learning, our longevity, and our labor.
They've been busy.
Very. And that leads us to the final frontier in today's deep dive. If the machines can outthink us, outdiagnose us, and outwork us, what is left that is uniquely, untouchably human?
Which brings us to creativity and art.
Exactly.
The conversation here shifts from systemic efficiency to profound philosophical disruption. The Digest covers the explosion of AI-generated art, music, and literature, which is basically forcing society to actively redefine the mechanics of creativity.
Right, and we've all seen the outputs, the photorealistic images, the symphonies generated from a text prompt in seconds. But I want to understand the how before we get to the why.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of people think the AI is just acting as a hyper-fast collage artist, just Googling a bunch of images, cutting them up, and mashing them together. But that's not what's happening, is it?
No, the mechanism is entirely different and far more complex than that. The models generating these images, diffusion models, for example, they don't store a database of pictures.
They don't.
No. They are trained on billions of image-text pairs, learning the statistical relationships between pixels. When you prompt the AI, it starts with a field of complete random mathematical noise, just static.
Like TV static.
Exactly. It then iteratively removes that noise, step by step, hallucinating the image out of a multi-dimensional mathematical space called the latent space based on the statistical probabilities of your prompt.
Wait, so it's mathematically destroying static until a coherent concept emerges?
Yes.
That is just wild. But it forces this huge authorship debate outlined in the text. I mean, I've heard the argument that this is just like the invention of the camera all over again.
Oh, so?
Well, in the 19th century, painters thought art was dead because a machine could capture reality instantly. but it really just gave birth to photography, and it pushed painters toward Impressionism.
Is AI just a new camera, like a new tool for human vision?
The purists mentioned in the digest would argue that the camera analogy totally fails here.
Why is that?
Because the camera still required a human to frame the shot, to understand the light, and to physically be present in the reality they were capturing. With generative AI, the machine isn't just the brush or the lens, it's sharing, or even executing, the conceptual idea.
Or is this fundamentally different because, for the first time, the machine is actually sharing the idea? Like, if I type a futuristic city at sunset in the style of Van Gogh into a prompt box, and the latent space hallucinates the masterpiece, who is the author?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because I provided the intent, but the algorithm executed the pixels, and the AI only knows what sunset and Van Gogh look like because it was trained on the scraped, digitized labor of thousands of actual human artists, which completely shatters the traditional illusion of the solitary genius. For technologists and artists who embrace the medium, AI is a collaborative tool that removes the friction of execution.
Meaning you don't need the physical skill.
Right. You no longer need 10 years of mechanical practice to paint a landscape. You only need the conceptual vision and the ability to engineer the prompt.
But doesn't that friction of execution actually matter?
What do you mean?
I mean, the struggle of the human hand trying to translate the complexity of the human soul onto a physical canvas, isn't that where the actual meaning of art lives? If you remove the lived experience of pain, joy, and mortality from the process and replace it with statistical probability, are we still making art, or are we just generating aesthetically pleasing pattern matching?
And that is the crux of the debate. The digest makes it very clear that AI isn't necessarily destroying art. It is forcing a relentless interrogation of what we value more. Do we value the final aesthetic output or the human struggle required to produce it?
Wow. We have covered massive ground today looking at how this technology is fundamentally rewiring our infrastructure. We started at the foundation, looking at how AI builds real-time cognitive models to perfectly tailor education, while simultaneously threatening to widen an already stark digital divide.
Right, and then we moved to healthcare, analyzing how predictive AI finds hidden biomarkers to shift medicine from reactive treatment to proactive prediction, creating immense friction around data privacy and patient consent.
From there, we looked at the business sector, where reinforcement learning agents are optimizing global supply chains in real time, bringing us face to face with the paradox of automating the consumer base out of a job.
And finally, we explored the realm of creativity, where diffusion models hallucinating images out of latent space are forcing us to redefine what the words authorship and originality actually mean.
AI really is the thread weaving a completely new societal fabric. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you listening right now with a lingering thought to just mull over on your own.
Always the best part.
We've spent this time dissecting AI as an unparalleled tool of optimization. It removes the friction from our learning, predicts our biological failures, streamlines our markets, and generates our culture on command. But, friction produces heat. Friction produces traction.
It does.
If a machine perfectly tailors our education so we never feel a sting of frustration, predicts our ailments so we never face sudden vulnerability, curates our economy so there is zero inefficiency, and generates our art without a drop of human sweat, at what point do we lose the beautiful, messy friction of being human? How much of our unoptimized struggle are we willing to trade for statistical perfection?
That's a profound question.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep your eyes open as the house gets rewired around you. Stay curious, keep questioning the world around you, and we'll catch you next time.